Chapter 15. Strangers and Friends. Sunlight finally wakes Rand from a deep but restless sleep. There had been more dreams after the nightmare, but he could not remember them like he could with the first. With a sigh he got out of bed, wincing as he stretched. All his aches were back now and his head hurt too. He wasn't surprised. A dream like that would give anyone a headache. The other beds were empty, and he saw by the sun's angle that he'd slept in, making him mutter angrily. A city to explore, and no one had woken him. As he washed and dressed, he ponders whether to wear his sword or not, but sees that Lan's sword is gone, so decides to follow the warder's lead and belts it on. He hurries down the stairs to the kitchen for a bite to eat. Master Fitch was in the kitchen, being confronted by the plump cook, who waved her finger under his nose. She was telling him how her cat Ciri was a good cat, and she wouldn't hear him be criticised for doing his job too well. Fitch was trying to tell her the guests were complaining, but she responds that if Ciri wasn't welcome, then she would leave with him and go where they're appreciated, and begins to take off her apron. Fitch yelps and pleads, "No, Sarah, please stay. Ciri is the best cat in Baerlon. If anyone complains, I'll tell them to be grateful Ciri is doing his job." Sarah puts her apron back on and chases Fitch from the kitchen. As he sat to eat, Sarah tells him to pay no mind to the argument, and tells Rand that guests were complaining about finding rats all over the inn, with their backs broken. As she talked, the food in his mouth turned to ashes. Rats with their backs broken, like in his dream. He needed to talk to someone. Rand heads to Matt and Perrin's room. Finding Perrin still lying in bed, Perrin tells him he didn't sleep well due to a dream, and Matt laughed at him about it, but he's sure Matt dreamt too, as he heard him tossing and muttering in the night. Rand licks his lips before asking, "Did he kill a rat?" Perrin stares at him, realizing they shared the dream. They discuss whether they should speak with Moraine, and whether Matt shared the dream as well. Rand suggests speaking to Tom, but Perrin worries that they can't trust anyone. He tells Rand that if they ever get home, to kick him if he ever talks of leaving again. Perrin decides to stay and rest a while longer, so Rand leaves with a parting remark about not missing the chance to see Baerlon. Rand heads out of the inn to explore the city, but the noise of so many people make him feel overwhelmed. He sits in the stable yard. "A shepherd with a heron-marked sword?" said a woman's voice behind him. Jumping up, he sees the girl Moraine had spoken to the night before. She was dressed in boy's clothes again, and he can tell that she's a little older than him. She asks if he's Rand, then introduces herself as Min, and that she can tell that they're in trouble, even if Moraine didn't tell her everything. But she sees what she sees. He asks why she thinks that Mistress Alice is called Moraine, and is bluntly told, "Because she told me. Not that she had a choice. I saw she was different right away during her last visit. She'd heard about me, as I've met others like her before. I don't see you going to the White Cloaks about me, considering the company you keep, so I'll tell you. I see pieces of the pattern, images that tell me things when I look at people. I can look at a man and woman who've never met and know that they'll marry. And then they do. She wanted me to look at you, all of you together." Shivering, Rand asks what she saw. Min replies, "When you're in a group, I see sparks swirling all around you, and a big shadow. The sparks try to fill the shadow, which in turn tries to swallow the sparks. You're all tied together in something dangerous, but I can't say what or how." Rand asks if she means that Egwene is part of it too. Min says, "The girl is part of it, the Gleeman too, all of you. You're in love with her. I can tell even without an image. She loves you too, but neither of you are meant for the other, not the way that you want." He asks what she means by that, and Min tells him that she sees the same type of images around Egwene as when she looks at Mistress Alice. There are other images she doesn't understand, but the girl won't refuse it. Rand calls it foolishness, and he tries to battle with the headache, which is turning his head numb and making him feel foggy. Despite wanting to be away from Min, he suddenly asks what she sees for the rest of them. Min grins, then says, "Master Andra has 7 ruined towers around his head, and a baby in a cradle holding a sword. Men like him always have lots of images crowding around each other. The Gleeman has a man, not him, juggling fire and the White Tower, which makes no sense for a man. The big curly-haired lad has a wolf, a broken crown, and trees flowering all around him. The other lad has a red eagle, an eye on a balance scale, a dagger with a ruby, a horn, and a laughing face. There are others for all of them, but those are the strongest, though I don't know what even half of it means." Still grinning, she pauses as if waiting until he finally asks what about him. Min answers, "A sword that isn't a sword, a gold crown of laurel leaves, a beggar's staff, you pouring water on sand, a bloody hand, white-hot iron, 3 women standing around your funeral bier, a black rock wet with blood, but most of all I see lightning around you, some striking you, some coming from you. The only thing I can read for sure is that we'll meet again." Rand tells Min that he's leaving, almost running from her. He can hear her laughing, then shout out, "Run if you want! You can't escape from me!" He ran out into the street, her words too close to Baalsman, and he blunders into the people until he gets his bearings. His head starts to feel clearer, and he begins to enjoy the experience of being in a city. He counted 9 inns at one point, though he hadn't seen anything that could pass for a palace. What he was amazed at was how everybody looked as if they would not look out of place back at home. He saw peoples of all walks of life, some dressed as fine as Moraine, and down to the miners that everyone complained about. Turning a corner, he stops in shock. A little man with a big nose and wearing clothes more like rags caught his eye. Padan Fain. His face was dirty and his eyes were sunken, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. When he saw Rand, he froze, and when Rand called out to him, he fled. Dodging past people, Rand chased him through the streets and into a dead-end alleyway. Hesitantly, Rand asks him what is wrong, that they'd all thought he was dead, taken by the Trollocs. Fain tells Rand not to mention them, not with white cloaks around. Rand tells him to come back to his inn, the Stag and Lion. He's staying there with friends. They'll be glad to see him, they all thought he was dead. Fain rambles on about how he knows how to survive, then with a strange change of demeanour cries about his wagon being burnt and his horses stolen by the innkeeper. Now all he has left is what he stands in. Rand reassures Fain that the horses are cared for by Bran Alvir, who'll happily return them to him. Now will he please come with Rand to the inn and let Moraine help him? At the mention of Moraine, Fain asks if she's the Aes Sedai, and how long they're staying at the inn. Rand tells him they leave tomorrow, and Fain goes on about how Rand has a full belly and a warm bed, so couldn't understand his plight. His face twists suddenly as he declares not wanting anything to do with Aes Sedai, making Rand promise not to mention him to her. Rand promises, but tries to persuade Fain not to be scared and come with him for a hot meal, with a final plea for Rand to keep his promise and a snide remark about not letting Moraine hurt him. Fain abruptly darts past Rand and out into the street. Chasing after him, Rand crashes into the back of a man, who mutters at him to watch where he's going and discovers it's Matt. The other boy says Rand will never guess who he just saw, only for Rand to answer, "Padan Fain?" and explain that he just talked to him, trying to describe the strange conversation. He asks Matt if he had a nightmare about a man who killed a rat. Matt admits that he did, saying he guesses that Perrin did too, which Rand confirms, and tells him all about the dead rats around the inn that morning. Rand was starting to feel strange, like his own voice was ringing in his head, and he wondered if he were getting sick. He may have to go to Moraine to see about it, surprising himself about how little the thought of the one power being used on him didn't bother him. He tells Matt he's going to speak with Tom for advice about whether they should tell Moraine. Matt agrees to speak with Tom, but not the Aes Sedai. They decide to head back to the inn to prevent Perrin from talking to her. Matt runs off but has to double back when Rand just stands there in a daze. He asks Rand what is wrong, and he says that he thinks he has a cold. His head is feeling like a tight drum. As they walk, Rand has trouble focusing, feeling as if he were drifting. He tells Matt about the visions Min had about them, and they discuss if they were true or if she were crazy. Rand's behaviour has Matt concerned that he really is ill. Matt points out 3 men in white cloaks walking through the street, their armour and clothing pristine. They walk with arrogance, looking down at the townspeople. They realise they were children of the light, and Matt says that they're so full of themselves they're begging for a prank. Matt spots a stack of barrels held by a single stake, telling Rand to watch, and he runs off. Rand finds himself looking forward to whatever Matt plans, yet knows that he shouldn't feel excited. This could be dangerous. Matt's head pokes out of an upper window of a shop, and using his sling knocks the stake out of place. The barrels fall and roll down the street, landing in puddles and throwing up muddy water. Most people jump out of the way, but the white cloaks get splashed. No longer pristine, they search the crowd for any culprit, and Rand finds himself laughing. They hear him and stalk over to Rand, asking, "You find something funny, yes?" Rand stops laughing but doesn't answer, and one of the children asks, if fear of the light holds his tongue, maybe he is responsible. The man talking to Rand has a knot of gold beneath the sunburst emblem, possibly signifying an officer. Rand tries to cover his sword but inadvertently moves the cloak aside, so they all see it, as he tells them that accidents happen, even to the children of the light. One of the other men points out to the officer, Lord Bornhold, that the sword is heron-marked. Bornhold says Rand is too young and asks where he's from. Rand acts as if he's only just arrived in Baerlon, asking if they know a good inn, but Bornhold takes it as mocking them. What evil stops him from answering their questions? Rand is filled with a tingling sensation, making him want to laugh, and the heat grew to a fever in his head. He knew something was wrong, but was so overwhelmed that he smiles, rocking back on his heels, anticipating what might happen. Bornhold's face darkens and one of his men draws his sword, demanding answers. He's cut off by the arrival of the town watch, who stood watching the white cloaks. Bornhold shouts that Baerlon stands in the shadow, and before leaving turns back to Rand saying, "Dark friends will not escape me. We will meet again." Once the white cloaks and the watch were gone, Matt reappears telling Rand that he's not sick, he's crazy. Rand was still burning with energy until he was quivering. Then abruptly the feeling leaves him, and he realizes just how badly that exchange could have gone. He tells Matt they need to get back to the inn, and as they walk, Rand ponders if the dreams are driving him mad. They got lost a few times, but then spot Tom walking through the street, a procession behind him as he proclaims where he'll be playing that night. They run up to him and begin telling him about the dream, but when they mention Baalzaman, Tom grabs them roughly, dragging them into an alley and looking to see they weren't overheard. He warns them never to say that name where people may hear, especially with white cloaks in town. He says the dream could be dismissed if only one had it, then has them tell him again, paying full attention this time. When they mention the names of Davian and Gwair Malison, and the others they were told were used, Tom tells them that they are dangerous names, men long dead who rocked the world when they lived. He can't see how they were used by the White Tower, though. They ask Tom what the Eye of the World is, and are told it's a borderland legend that young men go searching for. He agrees with them not to tell Moraine, not yet, suggesting they rush to the Stag and Lion to stop Perrin from doing just that. When they arrive, they almost bump into Perrin as he's leaving. They ask him if he spoke to the Aes Sedai, and Perrin says no. He looks pointedly at Tom, saying he thought they weren't going to talk to anyone. Rand explains he had to speak with someone or he'd go crazy. Perrin nods, then tells him he was on his way to find them, as Nynaeve is here. Matt yelps, saying, "Blood and ashes! How did she get here? Moraine sank the ferry." Perrin snorts, saying, "A little thing like that wouldn't stop the wisdom. And Nynaeve made Hightower row her across. She says she's here to bring us all home. And right now she's holed up with Mistress Alice, and the room is freezing enough to snow." Rand panics, declaring that she can't make them go back. Winter night should make her see that, and Matt suggests that they sneak away. Tom tells them that they best not keep Nynaeve waiting. She may attract attention if she doesn't see they're safe soon. Taking deep breaths, the boys steel themselves as if they were about to face a Trolloc. Thanks for listening. Please like, share and subscribe and help get a new channel off the ground. Thank you.